I thank everyone for joining. We are going to record this session. We had a number of people that were not able to join in person, so we are recording this and we'll be sending the link out afterwards if you want to review some of the things we discussed. I appreciate everyone taking their time. I know it's a bit to ask for everyone to get together in the morning after St. Patty's Day, so I hope everyone managed to survive. Our topic for this morning's webinar is the 4 pillars of modern networking, and we're excited to jump into that. So I'm Dan Wilkie. I'm the local account executive for Evolving Solutions here in Omaha. And joining me today are Matt Erickson and Julian McRoy, who are 2 of our senior network architects at Evolving Solutions. Go ahead and move, change slides, please. And one more. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Evolving Solutions, we are a technology solutions provider. And our focus is really on helping our clients modernize and automate their mission critical applications and the underlying infrastructure that those applications run on. What we've found over the years in working with our clients is that oftentimes the business is coming to the technology team asking for new ways of deploying their business applications, or asking for the ability to expedite the deployment of changes and applications. But what they weren't getting is double the budget to go hire the staffing needed to both maintain the legacy environment and build out this new platform needed to support a modern way of deploying those applications. And that's really become our focus at Evolving Solutions, is helping our customers deploy that hybrid cloud approach and having that agility that they need to deploy those applications. Next slide. It's interesting, our current global situation, how things have changed and what hasn't changed over the last year. Heading into last year, the priority of many of the businesses were to start enabling, for those who hadn't already, start enabling the ability to deploy applications faster and change the way they interact with their customers. And literally overnight, many of those businesses found that was paramount to the success and the longevity of their business. And it's been an interesting thing to witness and to work with our customers through to help them navigate those changes necessary to continue to deliver their services to their customers. And it's really highlighted and validated what our approach has been with our clients over the last couple of years. And on this next slide here is our hybrid cloud vision. And it's really built around helping modernize both not only the platforms that the business technology runs on, and we see here I've got network highlighted on this slide for today, but I could have just as well highlighted half of the items on this chart, because the network is so wide-reaching within this entire hybrid cloud vision. And having a modern platform is great, but you also have to bring the modern operational approach to managing those environments. And the network is so wide-reaching that you really can't do most of these without having the right network foundation from which to build it on, which is a big part of our topic for today in the 4 pillars of modern network design, and why we felt like this was a good topic to bring to you guys today, to talk about how network plays such a critical role in the success of the digital transformation that many businesses are going through today. So without further ado, I'd like to kick it over to Matt Erickson, Senior Network Architect at Evolving Solutions, to get the discussion kicked off. Matt?
Cool. Hey everyone, nice to meet you virtually. So I'm Matt with the Evolving Solutions team, and my primary hobbies or buzzwords these days are zero trust, access control, SD-WAN, SASE, Wi-Fi 6, 6E, right? Those are the things that trying to keep an eye on for customers. One thing I just want to lead into as we kind of transition over to the meat of it, which is Julian for today. Couple of questions, or the question I always keep getting with customers we work heavily with is like, all right, what's top of mind? What's going on? What are people asking about? Everybody's kind of asking me for one of the things or one or many of the things on this slide. And what I just tried to do is put some things down on paper. And most people know 2020 is, well, 2020 was the year of ransomware, business email compromise. That drove a lot of things, especially as folks were doing remote users or doing cloud migrations, right, or hybrid exchange or exchange migrations. There's a lot of doors left open. That turned into, hey, whoever didn't have MFA turned on in the world, everybody has MFA turned on in the world. But then the next thing was, we had a lot of customers that, you know, came to us saying, hey, we got ransomware, our backups were bad, or hey, we didn't actually have somebody watching our SIM, so, and the network wasn't segmented, so they got our backups. Now we have no backups. So that was kind of the theme of 2020. And then me being network infrastructure guy, I also had some tactical things, right? Like network access control. For sure, folks are doing that, as well as SD-WAN to connect the branches. Last year was a little unique because we actually had a little more time to take care of branches. Fast forward to now, just in this last 2 months, the key things people have been asking me about has been, it's still been network technology, but either from a business continuity or a security, you know, overall theme. Like Julie and I have just been getting the constant request saying, hey, we had something happen, or if something happened, people and everybody's teams are saying, hey, enough is enough. You actually need to segment your stuff this year. Enough talking about it. Get out of the way and get that done. And then meanwhile, Julie and I make sure customers do have good backup, and actually somebody is watching your network with managed detection, especially with the whole Microsoft thing. Everybody knows about that, but now it's important people watch your stuff so that if somebody does, something does get into the network, we at least have some of those segmentation controls in place. And I just thought this was important because what's been happening has been saying, hey, I need you to go restrict access, or let's say my management server had a problem. Hey, Julian, how could you better secure that, right? If somebody got into my network management host, right? Or this Exchange host, or this Oracle server, or whatever our key database is. And then the answer is, it depends. But if you have a modern network approach, then we don't have to do all these duct tape and, you know, baling twine, right, to make something work. That's been a key item. And Julian, he'll kind of go through some of the technical, because he's definitely been helping customers through this data center segmentation. I do obviously a lot in data center, but also the branch SASE network device at remote sites. So Julian, if you could maybe help us kind of talk through that, you know, I'm thinking of those situations where, hey, customers don't have a modern network fabric, they have classic, so we're throwing millions of dollars of firewalls in everywhere. Could you maybe just do kind of talk through the you know, what folks are doing now for dual data centers and what the new options are?
Yep, certainly.
Or maybe not new, but the options we wish we had in place, right?
Yeah, so to Matt's point, well, first of all, my name is Julian McRoy. I'm also a senior network architect here with Evolving Solutions. It's important, I guess, to kind of give you guys a quick background. You know, I've been in the industry for 21 years, 10 years focused specifically on data center. And the last 6 years, I've worked for Cisco Systems as a data center solutions architect. So I've worked with enterprise customers throughout the Midwest, but mostly focused in Minneapolis or in the Twin Cities, focusing on software-defined networking and modern data center infrastructures. And certainly what I've experienced and observed from all customers is that applications are becoming omnipresent. They run in enterprise data centers, they run in the cloud, they run at the edge, they run in colos. There has to be meaningful and creative ways to be able to deliver networking, to deliver network security, and standardize and normalize network policies across these environments. Many customers have cloud first and cloud only type strategies that they're trying to lean towards, but many still have applications running on-prem. Many, if not most, right? So there has to be a way to be able to deliver networking still on-prem while also focusing on network policy and network security and segmentation in the cloud as well. So the experience that I had working with enterprise customers throughout the Midwest over the last 6 years, if you think 6 years ago, SDN was still very much a buzzword. A lot of people thought it stood for still does nothing. And so that still is a matter of perspective on what is SDN and what is not. But what's more important than buzzwords is to focus on value. And that's what, before I went to Cisco Systems, I worked for a customer who's now one of my customers in the Twin Cities. And, I focused on other software overlay SDN type solutions, right? And working at Cisco for the last 6 years, I've obviously been focusing on Cisco's SDN strategy. And in both cases, both as a customer and as a solutions architect with Cisco, my focus always was, let's figure out what's the value, what's the business value that can be delivered with a modern data center infrastructure. So many workshops, many conversations with a lot of customers over time about what are the problems they're trying to solve. Let's not focus on buzzwords. Let's not talk about industry hype. And let's instead focus on what are the problems that you have today. There's a perspective that networking is not secure. There's a perspective that networking is too slow to deliver services. People want to go with the software overlay approach to bypass the network team and so forth. And so let's unpack that and try to figure out what are the real problems. My viewpoint, if you asked me 8 years ago, I'd say my networking strategy is perfectly fine. It takes me a little bit of time to deploy some VLANs across multiple data centers, configuring, whatever layer 2 stretch strategies we're using. There's a lot of touch points, but I can log into CLI of 50 devices and eventually get my configuration complete. There has to be a better way, and SDN certainly introduces a better way to provide networking. So through all of the workshops that I had with customers, all the conversations, the first thing I did was go to the whiteboard and say, what are the problems you're trying to solve? Let's make a bulleted list. And through all of those, in the vast majority, it came down to 4 basic principles, 4 basic things that, in my opinion, at this point, any specific network solution has to be able to offer. And that, put simply, is automation, security, mobility, and visibility, right? Those certainly are the 4 pillars. So let's dig into that a bit. Open APIs. So these groupings that I have over here on the right, these are broad statements that encompass a great deal of detail. Open APIs obviously is all about automation, orchestration, programmability. So most vendor solutions today at least claim to have open APIs, and it's arguable whether or not one is more open than the other. But it's necessary to have a RESTful interface with exposed object model and exposed APIs. This gives you cloud automation. It enables DevOps, and it enables CI/CD. It puts you in a position to be able to automate your network infrastructure. So that's critical. And every customer is trying to achieve automation. That's difficult. Automation is not easy, but there's definitely kind of low-hanging fruit and things that can and should be automated, things that are repeatable. So automation is one of the pillars for sure. Second listed here is multi-cloud. Again, a lot of different talk points here. Each one of these bullets, we could spend an hour kind of talking through the details. But at a high level, what I mean by multi-cloud in this context is the ability to support applications wherever they might exist across multiple data centers. There are very meaningful ways to stretch policy across data centers today, both from within a specific geography, within a specific metro area, or from a global perspective. There's really incredible ways now with modern data center solutions to be able to normalize network policy. But then there's also the importance of being able to normalize policy and figure out how can you be secure and be consistent with your network policies in cloud. How can my hybrid cloud strategy support policies in AWS, policies in Azure, where there's different network constructs? I have VPCs and NACLs and security groups in AWS. I've got VNets and NSGs and ASGs in Azure. And what's the difference between these things? Both these cloud solutions, as well as on-prem SDN solutions, have group-based policy models that allow for network segmentation and security. And it's a matter of mapping these different group-based policies so you understand the objects and hopefully be able to normalize the operations so that when you're delivering policy out to public cloud and to on-prem, it's done in a consistent way. So this is going to give you ultimately workload mobility. It gives you policy consistency, policy normalization. So having a multi-cloud strategy as part of an SDN solution certainly is something that's critical as well. The next pillar here is multi-tenant. Again, a lot of elements here, but what I really mean is security. This is all about being able to secure the data plane. This is about being able to secure the control plane. This is about being able to secure the management plane. I need to be able to make sure that my users and my administrators are logging into my system. They're only able to access the resources that they should have access to. I need to make sure that, if I have the condition where I have Pepsi and Coke, for example, I have different business lines of business, I have different acquisitions and mergers and things like that happening. And as I aggregate all of my different lines of business and different user groups onto a shared infrastructure, how can I make sure that that is multi-tenant and it supports the security that's necessary? So this is all about security, zero trust, network virtualization, and network segmentation. The fourth pillar is
Julian, the other interesting one on that, right, was just network guys. Usually our test network is prod.
Yep.
In this new world, right, we could have a non-prod test network on the physical hardware, right? So you don't have to work twice as hard, spend twice as much money, but we can test changes and rollback changes on the infrastructure, right? So that's an important network guy differentiator.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Just to double click on that a bit, I mean, the ability to have a centralized, and I'll talk about this a bit in one of the upcoming slides, but have a centralized control point where you can manage policy for your data center in one place allows for things like, I'm going to submit a change. First of all, I can do some assurance. There's technologies that allow you to do assurance so that the change you're going to instrument is not going to be impactful in a negative way. There's things where you can analyze your policy intent and make sure that your change is not going to impact things. But if it does and you need to roll back, you can roll back the entire network infrastructure and the change was made to the previous known good state, right? And also to your point, Matt, to be able to say, I'm going to use network virtualization constructs in order to be able to provide multi-tenancy. So I can spin up, I may not have a dedicated test environment, but I can spin up a new tenant, right? So the SDN solution has to have the notion of a tenant. That's just something that's necessary. I can spin up a new tenant with its own dedicated network from a layer 3 perspective, layer 2 perspective, and for that matter, layer 1 perspective. I can have full isolation and separation from other tenants that are running on that same shared infrastructure. So being a multi-tenant platform certainly is really important. Telemetry and analytics. This is another good one, right? So what I mean by this is, historically we've used SMP and syslog and other kind of, traditional tools to observe networks and who's going to be sitting down looking at the logs. Is this a constructive way? There has to be a better way, right? So modern, what we find in the cloud is certainly there's analytics tools that are positioned there, but even on-prem, we need to have tools that allow for assurance and analytics around what's happening within the network. Where are the top talkers? Where are the hotspots in the network? I want to be able to see flow level telemetry and be able to do analytics around that flow level telemetry. I want to be able to measure my policy intent against what's actually being positioned in the fabric. So whichever switches you might be choosing to implement, whether from whatever vendor, Cisco, Arista, and so forth, there has to be flow telemetry in most of these switches. In many cases, whether it's merchant silicon or proprietary, to be able to pull flow telemetry, streaming telemetry out of your fabric and do analytics around that. Having analytics platforms that observe and provide assurance and provides deep visibility with flow level telemetry into what's happening inside the fabric. So these are kind of the 4 pillars that make up an SDN solution and in what in most cases customers are trying to achieve as they pivot towards a modern SDN fabric. At the end of the day, these 4 pillars allow for any cloud, any application, anywhere, right? I want to provide that policy normalization consistency across the board. So let's kind of dig into this a bit. I'm going to skip through this. I know we've only got a few minutes left here. So traditional network designs, obviously, a lot of customers still have core aggregation access where the aggregation is your layer 3 route point for the network. You have a bunch of boxes that are managed individually at the CLI. This is difficult to automate, difficult to manage. Trust me, I've lived and breathed this for many years. And like I said, I didn't see this as a problem because that's the way we did business historically, but there are better ways to instrument networking today. So generally there's 2 trains of thought. There's software overlay or there's integrated. So software overlay, the idea with the software overlay strategy is that I want to take all of the complexity and all of the intelligence out of the network and put it into a software container. When you do this, you give it the same operational model as a virtual machine, so you can back it up and restore it. You can stop it and start it. The underlying network, because the underlying network is not going to be wireless, you'll still have some vendor's switching platform in place, and that network now just becomes plumbing. So it just needs to provide IP reachability across your different servers on the network. So that software overlay strategy, Nuage Networks used to be a player in the space. I think they're largely focused on enterprise SD-WAN and 5G for telco cloud and NFV type stuff. But for certainly VMware NSX is another key player in the space, where VMware NSX being the latest iteration of their software overlay strategy. The other strategy is integrated overlay. And that integrated overlay could, whether we're talking Cisco ACI or Arista Cloud Vision as well, and I'd say Big Switch, but Arista certainly bought Big Switch several years ago at this point. So, but there's several players that go with this approach where maintain the intelligence in the network and allow integration northbound and southbound, northbound from an orchestration perspective, southbound down into whatever workloads are connected, whether it's vSphere, Microsoft System Center, Kubernetes, and so forth. One key point of any modern data center fabric, it's going to be spine and leaf. Spine and leaf is the standard, de facto standard for layer 2 scale and multi-tenancy, and providing an integrated overlay. Today, generally in the form of VXLAN across switch vendors, is the way to go. And so whether, from Cisco's perspective, it's VXLAN EVPN, it's Cisco ACI, obviously Arista uses VXLAN EVPN as well, but having a layer 3 spine and leaf architecture, there's significant improvement in network performance by doing this, because now that layer 3 point becomes the leaf switches in your spine and leaf fabric. So your IP, your first hop gateway becomes pervasive. It becomes omnipresent, right? Wherever the workloads are, the first hop gateway follows them. So now all of the network intelligence is on the leaf switches across the fabric. This gives you equidistant cross-sectional bandwidth, right? Okay, so another thing I want to click on here really quick is network segmentation, right? So this is every single customer that I talked to through those workshops. Network segmentation, even going back 6 years, to Matt's point, it certainly is a hot topic today, but it's not a new topic. We've talked about network segmentation for many years. In the network, we used to have the strategy of just make the firewall the first hop gateway and plug a bunch of VLANs and trunk it to the firewall. That's the historic strategy. You might choose to leverage private VLANs or something like that in the past, which was really difficult, and no one ever wanted to do that. There are better ways, there are much more meaningful ways now of instrumenting network segmentation. And like Matt said, a lot of customers who have adopted SDN strategies already, many of them have done so in a very simplistic way, and there are a lot more meaningful things that you can do from a security perspective. So customers that we work with that already have an SDN solution that are trying to do network segmentation, okay, let's use this in more creative ways so that you can actually instrument network segmentation in an easy, scalable, and standard way, right? Being able to take input sources from things like Kubernetes or, every data center that I've looked at and, historically has multiple workloads. It's going to have bare metal workloads. You might have multiple VM managers, vCenter, Microsoft System Center, and so forth, OpenShift, so whatever your input sources are that make up your applications that are running in the data center, the goal is to achieve network segmentation. So being able to leverage integrations to understand what are those different sources of policy, run it through some policy engine, and then being able to deliver network and application level segmentation is something that's critical. So if you've already adopted an SDN solution, and this is true of pretty much every vendor that I've mentioned, if you've adopted an SDN solution, being able to leverage those tools to achieve network segmentation. This is not easy, right? And it's not, this in and of itself doesn't give you a zero trust architecture, but this is part of a defense in depth strategy. Being able to leverage the network infrastructure and intelligence in the network, whether physical or virtual, to be able to instrument network segmentation policies. Okay, this is my last
Julian,
Julian,
yeah, I was going to say
sir.
On that last one, that's really where the rubber is meeting the road, right? Everybody's saying, quit talking to buzzwords. I already have this stuff. Help me protect this SQL database, right? Or this Oracle database, right? It's like every call, it's like whatever our thing that we're most concerned about, they're like, no, let's get the teams together. Let's just figure this out because we need to, because of insert concern here, right? So
yep.
This is where either we're building the fabric with a services quick start and we're saying, let's just build the fabric dual data centers fast. Let's get the connectivity done, but then let's get segmentation done, right? Enough talking about it, right? We need to do it. We need to do it for pick a domain you're concerned about, right?
Yep, absolutely, man. Yeah, I mean, most of these solutions have the solutions that are in play. We talked about Cisco solutions, VMware solutions, and so forth. They have whitelist models, right? They have, they can certainly be part of a zero trust strategy because of the fact that when you put, each one of these solutions have a group-based policy model. And when by default, when you put an endpoint into a group and you put another endpoint into a different group, there's no communication allowed unless you explicitly say so. Also, in many cases, there's modern abstractions between location and identity. So you can say I have multiple endpoints that are on the same IP subnet. The IP subnet used to be kind of that demarc, right? That every endpoint that ends up on a single IP subnet is therefore on a specific VLAN, and therefore what's your security for that VLAN? Is a firewall the first hop gateway? Is it all tied onto a particular VRF that sits behind a particular firewall? You know, but those were the constructs that we were limited to. With modern solutions, there's layers of abstraction between what the endpoint is, who the endpoint is, and where it's located in the network. And the namespaces, you know, separate namespaces for who the endpoint is versus what IP subnet they're on. So I can take those several hundred servers that might have ended up on a specific VLAN historically with just the firewall as a first hop gateway and provide east-west segmentation. That's par for the course. That's table stakes for the modern network data center solutions to be able to do this type of segmentation. And so to leverage these, but again, a lot of customers have, even the ones that have adopted this at scale in enterprise, still haven't, you know, are still striving to achieve segmentation. How can I've adopted this modern solution? There's enough of a learning curve for me to adopt this new thing because there's this software overlay, and so you've got, you know, server virtualization guys and network guys working together in ways they never have before. How can they, you know, achieve? Usually they start very simple. And then it's, so take the first step, operationalize the fabric or the platform, and then let's get more constructive in terms of how we're using this to instrument network segmentation and other capabilities that go well beyond just the fundamental network connectivity stuff that people do with generally day one. So now we've only got 1 minute left here. So I'm gonna go end on this slide. The end goal has to be data center network anywhere, right? Being able to take different types of solutions on-prem and public cloud and operationalize this to provide standard and consistent policy model. So that no matter where you're pushing application or workload policy to, network policy supporting workloads to, that's done so in a very consistent way. And you know that when policy gets pushed, whether it's going out to an ACI fabric or whether it's going out to an NSX environment, whether it's going to Azure, whether it's going to AWS, to be able to provision that network policy in a very consistent way is something that that I think we have to strive for as we move forward. There's various vendors products that can achieve this for us today. And this is definitely a critical capability, because if you try to adopt 20 different solutions and all of those solutions each have their own operating model, that's obviously very difficult to manage. So to be able to normalize policy across those different solutions is something that's key to the strategy.
And Julian, I know we're out of time, but the big takeaway for me on this was I thought everybody was going to be asking me about AWS and networking in Azure, and they still are, but it's more of a connectivity and encryption and some basic segmentation out there. I thought that was going to be number one on the list, but actually number one on the list for 2021 is getting the fabric, both data centers, so that if anybody's on the server virtualization app team, you don't want to re-IP stuff. we're back to let's just get networking in both places so you guys can move your workload wherever you want. That's definitely been not a surprise to me, but folks are for sure saying, no, we have to have this problem solved this year.
Yep. So I think we're past time here. We had 30 minutes allocated, right, Dan? I don't know if we had time for questions.
Yeah, I don't see any questions come in the chat here, but I mean, this certainly has highlighted for me the complexity that is reality in the network today. And I know we just scratched the surface on a lot of this, but you know, we want to meet our clients where they're at in their journey and help them make progress towards you know, deploying this modern networking approach. And I know that Matt and Julian have it as their personal goals to make sure that SDN no longer stands for still does nothing. So we appreciate everyone's time. Julian, if you can bump over to the next slide real quick here. As far as what's on tap for this afternoon, we appreciate everyone pivoting with us on the venue change. The game time has been a moving target for us. So we are getting together at DJ's Dugout this afternoon on 180th and Q over by the Hy-Vee. Check-in will start around 3:45. Game time starts at 4:10. So we'll have pun intended, networking at the event there. And we hope that this serves as a catalyst for some good discussion around where you are in your current network journey and where you're trying to get to. We will certainly, if you have questions or want to dive into something deeper, feel free to reach out to myself, Phil Fisichella, our enterprise architect in Omaha, and of course you can reach out directly to Matt or Julian for any additional questions. So looking forward to seeing everyone this afternoon that's going to be able to make it. And we appreciate your attendance and are looking forward to continuing the discussion. Thanks, everyone.